everyone, this is Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video is stitch number 3 in our year-long crochet along. We're making a blanket called the Harmony Sample Blanket, and each month we're learning a new stitch to add to our blanket. Now in January we did the modified granny stitch. In February we did the V-stitch. This is March, so today we're going to be doing what's called a cross stitch or a twist. I've heard it called both things, and I don't care what you call it. It's a fun stitch to make. Now this is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. So the blanket measures, when we're all finished, approximately 25 by 25 inches. Now, if you want to make your blanket wider, you can add 3 chains per inch. But remember, you're going to have to do some adjusting and work out how big you want your blanket. If you want your blanket longer, you can add more rows of each stitch, which is what I have been doing. On the first one we did, let me move the one underneath so we don't have too many colors going on. For the first stitch, the modified granny stitch, I actually did 4 rows. And each stitch has a single crochet or a double crochet in between in order to give us a foundation. And here we have a row of double crochet foundation. And then I just did 3 rows of the V-stitch from February's stitch. Today we're going to be doing what's called either the twist stitch or the cross stitch. But before we do that, we need to make a row for a foundation stitch, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. Now the whole blanket is stitched in worsted weight number 4 yarns, and I'm just using up my solids from my yarn stash. You can use variegated if you want to. I do suggest that you stick with the same weight of yarn through your whole project. I'm going to be using some yellow and purple for today, just for some nice contrast for all the other colors that I have in my blanket. We're stitching with an H hook. This is an H8, which is a 5.00 millimeter crochet hook, and we will be using an H hook for all of our stitches for the entire blanket. You'll need a needle for weaving in those ends and a pair of scissors. Alrighty, let's get started. We're going to stitch a row of single crochets for our foundation for this row, or this stitch I should say. So I'm bringing in my purple, snug that down, and then I'm going to chain 1. We're going to place a single crochet in each of the double crochets across, and then we're also going to place a single crochet in this chain 1 space of each of the V stitches. So we'll go in that first stitch because our chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and stitch a single crochet. So we stitched 1 single crochet in those first 4 stitches. We're going to stitch a single crochet in the double crochet. Then we'll stitch a single crochet in the chain 1 space. And then we'll stitch a single crochet in the next double crochet. And this is the way we'll do working across this row. Single crochet in the double crochet, single crochet in the chain 1 space, and single crochet in the double crochet. And we'll work this all the way across, and this will give us just a nice even row to work our cross stitches on. There we go. And this is the way that it should look. Nice and even row of single crochets across. So I finished going all the way across, and now I'm going to place one single crochet in each of those last 4 single crochets. I had to finish off that V-stitch, and then one in each of the last 4. And like I said, that gives us just a nice even row, and it helps our V-stitches sort of stand out as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut our yarn and leave ourselves enough so we can weave that in, and we're going to bring in our next color. Now if you want to leave your same color, that's totally fine. I don't have any problem with that. You can even do it all in one color if you want to. I think it would be fun if it was all done in like a muted white or a light blue. All right, so we're going to join in our next color and chain 1, 2, and 3. Now our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet on this row. And this row is the row we're going to do our cross stitches. So our chain 3 counts as our first stitch, so we're not going to stitch in the first stitch. We're going to begin stitching a double crochet in the next stitch. And we'll stitch 2 more, so we have a total of 4 on the end, because our chain 3 counted as our first double crochet, and then we stitched 3 more double crochets. Now we're going to begin our cross stitches, and what we're going to do, we're going to yarn over, we're going to skip the next stitch, and then we're going to double crochet in the next stitch. See that hole there where we skipped? We're going to yarn over, and we're going to stitch a double crochet right in that stitch that we skipped. And see how that crossed over? And we're going to do this all the way across. So we'll yarn over, skip the next stitch, stitch a double crochet in the next, and then cross back and stitch a double crochet in that stitch we just skipped. Isn't that pretty? This is a fun way to add a little extra texture without changing your stitch count, because our stitch count will be the same because we're still stitching a double crochet in each stitch. We're just crossing back and catching the one that we skipped. All right, so let's keep going right across. Skip the next, double crochet in the next, then double crochet in the skipped stitch. This is why it's one of my favorite stitches. It's just so pretty to stitch up and add that little extra texture without messing up your stitch count and without a lot of extra work. Now when you first start doing the cross stitches, it can seem a little clumsy because we're crossing back, but once you start doing it and practice just a little bit, you'll see it's a really simple stitch. Isn't that pretty? I've stitched cross stitches all the way across, and again, I just love this stitch. And then we're going to get to those last 4 single crochets. We're going to place a double crochet in each of those 4 single crochets. And I'm going to stitch another row with this yellow. So I'm going to make a chain 3. I'm going to turn. Now you can change colors if you want to. Just make sure that if you change colors, you change before you do the chain 3, because our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to place 1 double crochet in those next 3 double crochets. And then this is the row that can be just a little bit tricky. So what I want you to do is look at the top of your row, and you can see where all your stitches are, and we're going to do it exactly the same. The only difference is this isn't a straight row of double crochets, it's a row of crosses. So here's our first stitch, so we'll go in our next one and stitch our double crochet, and then we'll come back and stitch that double crochet in the skipped stitch. Don't let it throw you off, just follow those stitches on the top so you can see where to place your stitches. Alright, so I'm going to go in this stitch, and I'm going to cross back and double crochet in the one I skipped. And see how that looks? We've got cross stitches on top of cross stitches. Love this stitch. Alright, so I'm going to keep right on making my cross stitches across this row. What a beautiful stitch. So I'm going to go ahead, like I mentioned, and go ahead and make my cross stitches across this row, and then I'll show you how to end the row. So I completed that second row, and isn't that just beautiful? Wonderful, wonderful stitch. All right, we're going to finish off again with 1 double crochet in those last 4 stitches. And remember that chain 3 of the previous row counted as a double crochet, so we need to make sure we put a double crochet in the top of that chain 3. I'm just going to put a chain 1 there just to hold it, to keep it from coming undone. And this is the way that this row should look. Isn't that beautiful? I do want to remind you that it's a good idea to weave your ends in as you go, or you'll end up with a whole bunch of ends that you have to weave in, since we're changing colors so often. And what I do is I'm on the end, and so I go right back in, trying to stay in the color that I'm weaving in so it doesn't mess up the look of the stitch. And I just go back and forth, and I try to do it 3 times. Sometimes I don't get my yarn long enough, and so I don't. I can only go through twice. But I go through all the stitches 3 times and then cut that off. So just a reminder, don't forget to weave in those ends. And that's how we do stitch number 3 for our Harmony sample blanket, the cross stitch.